What's going on, Gooners?
Oh my god, I'm gooning!
Goon Saloon here. And this is going to be a trade-heavy video. I'm going to go through all the trades that have happened up until this point on March 6th at 1700 Eastern Standard Time. But I kind of want to talk about a few things before we get into each specific trade. This topic's a little bit old, but hey, you know what? It's new to me. Brady Tkachuk's response to the American Anthem being booed when he was in Ottawa. Now, I have to caution Canadiens fans, and Tkachuk's under contract until 2028. But if you keep alienating U.S.-born players and keep disrespecting the anthem, do not be surprised when U.S. players don't want to stay in your country. And I'm not trying to make this a political channel. I'm just saying, regardless of who's in office, there's still that amount of pride you have as a nation, and just having people openly disrespect the anthem could turn off some of these players, and especially in a Canadian market where they already struggle retaining their own native-born players because of the taxes and, you know, the tax breaks they can get elsewhere in the lower 48, I should say. You can't alienate all these players. Now, who knows? Maybe it goes away. It's no big deal, and it's a nothing burger. But I would worry, if I was a Canadian fan, if this kept on going, you could piss off some Americans that would probably deter themselves from even signing with a team in Canada. That was kind of a big story about Brady Tkachuk. You could tell he wasn't happy, shook his head in disgust. I think anybody would get frustrated over a period of time where it's like constantly getting booed. It's like, okay, enough. We understand you don't like the guy in office. That's fine. But the open disrespect towards someone's country, that can make a player not want to play in a certain destination. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. And let's talk about Rantanen. Rantanen has been rumored to be possibly moved by the Carolina Hurricanes. Now, if Rantanen is moved before the deadline by the Carolina Hurricanes, that trade is a massive failure. It's already a massive failure. Let's call it what it is, right? I think Rantanen's better than what he's been showing in Carolina. I think there's more there offensively. I don't think he's just only and solely a product of Nathan MacKinnon. But I would also be remiss not to mention, I mean, when you're playing with like the second best or best player in the world, depending on who you're asking, of course you're going to see some offensive dip. It's just, it is what it is. And you gave up Martin Necas, who you had another year on. You had control over him for another year. You give him up for a player that's expiring and you're not able to get a deal done, and he just walks. It's an absolute terrible mismanagement of assets. And if the Carolina Hurricanes trade Rantanen, good luck trying to get anything crazy for him at a price, because he's going to want to get a top-of-the-market deal. That's what he's going to want. He's going to want a top-of-the-market deal if he's not going to sign in a certain situation. So if you deal Rantanen, you better be ready to spend money if you're the team that's acquiring him and lock him up long-term, or just be prepared for him to walk. And with how negotiations have gone the past couple of years with certain free agents, looking at you, Jeremy Swimmen, there can be a lot of shenanigans with negotiations, and it's not a sure thing if you trade for a guy and you give up maybe, let's say, a first or a second. I think that'd be an overpay at this point because he's a pure rental. But like, let's say you give up something crazy in draft capital, you're giving up a future asset for a guy that's going to be there for, 20-something games? For a lot of teams, it just does not make sense. Unless they're trying to win a Stanley Cup. I mean, a team that could make sense, that probably, they showcase they don't care about the future long-term, is the Florida Panthers. And Zito's an amazing general manager, but, you gave up Spencer Knight, your goaltender of the future, for help right now. The Florida Panthers would make sense, right? Tkachuk's out. Probably not coming back until the playoffs. A guy like Rantanen comes and slots in. While he's definitely not same play style as Matthew Tkachuk, still a great player. That's a fantastic replacement. But unless a cup-starving team, a team that's like really close to the edge, and they feel like Rantanen could give him the chance to get over the hump and win another cup like the Florida Panthers, I think the market's going to be relatively small for him. So, again, that's just, in my personal opinion, one of the worst trades of the year. Carolina dealing Necas for Rantanen. And I was a fan of Necas' game, but this year he's really come into his own, and he's been brilliant. And then going in Colorado, he's looked just as good. So kind of want to discuss some of the trades that have gone down. Vegas Golden Knights acquire forward Riley Smith from the New York Rangers for forward Brendan Brisson and a third-round pick. Makes sense for both sides. The Vegas Golden Knights, he has familiarity with that system, right? Riley Smith has been there before. They know the player. They know what he is, know what he isn't. Is he a guy that's like in his prime and scoring like 20-plus goals? No, but he'll give you a little bit of scoring punch in the bottom six, right? And that's what you need, especially if you're the Vegas Golden Knights and you're trying to do something in the playoffs and maybe win another Stanley Cup. And as for the Rangers, I mean, they are what they are this season, right? Might as well deal a guy like that. You get a decent forward back and you get a third-round pick, so you get a future asset. I think it makes sense for both sides. Then you have the Winnipeg Jets acquiring goalie Chris Drager from the Florida Panthers for goalie Kapu Kakkonen. This is kind of like a goaltender swap. It makes sense in some regards. I mean, the Panthers did just deal Spencer Knight, so they're going to be kind of playing with that backup goaltender situation. I think Kakkonen, when I saw him play for the Sharks, I thought he was solid enough. You know, I know they acquire him from the Jets. It will be interesting to see how things kind of pan out there. They get a guy that has some NHL experience and can fill in and need it. It's fine. I mean, Bobrovsky's the guy there. I mean, you wouldn't trade Spencer Knight if you weren't going to, ride Sergei Bobrovsky into the ground. Next trade, New Jersey Devils acquire defenseman Brandon Dumoulin from the Anaheim Ducks for forward Herman Traft in a second-round pick. Devils are trying to add some more depth down in the defensive core. Devils want to get further along than they did last year in the playoffs. Just call it what it is. I think that they just want to be good. They want to be impactful. They want to make sure that they have enough depth, and they're just a hard team to play against. And they have a ton of talent on that team. Obviously, health provided. Hughes is back healthy, and everybody's kind of clicking. They're going to be a very difficult team to beat in a 7-game series, and you add another quality piece. And as for the Ducks, I mean, they're a young team. Makes sense. Keep getting more draft picks. Keep getting, those lottery tickets and trying to get these players in here that maybe in a few years down the line, they'll be like maybe star level, right? I mean, you have a bunch of young talent there in the Ducks. I think it makes sense to just kind of keep building there. As for another trade that kind of went down, the Florida Panthers acquire forward Nico Sturm and a 7th-round pick in the 2027 NHL draft from San Jose for a 4th-round pick in 2026. Again, a depth move. Sturm, bottom 6 guy, 4th-line guy, give you some energy. I think, yeah, solid move here. I mean, and you give up for a 4th-round pick. They're clearly in win-now mode, which I respect. I really do appreciate Zito as a general manager understanding that this is the window. This is their championship window, and these windows don't always come often. Another trade that went down is Nashville Predators acquire forward Michael Bunting and a 4th-round pick in 2026 from the Pittsburgh Penguins for defenseman Luke Schenn and forward Tommy Novak. So the Penguins get Luke Schenn and Tommy Novak. Luke Schenn is a quality defenseman. He's a good leader, very solid defensively. And Novak can be, what did he score against the Bruins the other night? I mean, Novak can add you some nice depth. The Pittsburgh Penguins really aren't anything this season. I think some of this moves is for, next year, trying to kind of establish a culture and try to get back into, a winning mode. I mean, we just saw the Washington Capitals, right? I mean, they were a playoff team last year, but they were kind of a wild card team. They went from being kind of like a fringe playoff team to one of the best teams in the NHL. Like, these turnarounds can happen. And I'm not saying you acquiring these players is immediately, oh, you're a cup contender. But small moves like this, and then you kind of smart additions in the offseason. The Penguins have Sidney Crosby. I'm never going to root against Sidney Crosby. Guy's a phenomenal talent. Would make sense to kind of see, like, hey, let's kind of retool on the way, get some pieces, and try to get things lined up for next season. So, yeah, I think all in all, I like that move. It's you feel bad for Bunting. You go for the Penguins, which very solid organization, even though they've had their pitfalls before they changed ownership. But the Penguins, it's pretty much since Crosby's been there, have been very well run for the most part. Kind of makes sense there. I think it's a decent deal. San Jose Sharks also acquire Vincent, and I always say Desjardins because of a guy on the Philadelphia Flyers back in the early 2000s, and I know that pronunciation's wrong, but I always I forget the correct pronunciation, so I apologize. From the Pittsburgh Penguins for a 5th-round pick. I mean, yeah, you get a decent little defenseman there. for a 5th-round pick. The Sharks there. 5th-round talent, I mean, your odds of making the NHL at that point, it's not huge. You're kind of giving up nothing crazy there for the Sharks. Just adding some NHL quality talent. Then a bigger trade that kind of went down with the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Seattle Kraken. Tampa Bay Lightning acquire forward Oliver Bjorkstrand, Yanni Gourde, and defenseman Kyle Coyne, and a 5th-round pick in 2026, and a 3-team deal involving the Seattle Kraken and Detroit Red Wings. Seattle Kraken acquire forward Michael Eyssimont, a 2nd-round pick in 2025, a conditional 1st-round pick in 2026, and a conditional 1st-round pick in 2027 NHL Draft. Troy acquires a conditional 4th-round pick in the deal. So, yeah, that's a lot to give up for Bjorkstrand and Yanni Gourde, who are kind of the apple of the eye of this trade market, right? Good players, I think. Like Yanni Gourde, kind of the guy a lot of people talked about. And for the Tampa Bay Lightning, who kind of sit in a playoff spot, while they're not like the Tampa Bay Lightning of old of that dynastic run, they're adding some pieces here and giving up some futures to try to, hey, maybe shock some people in the playoffs. I mean, the Lightning are still a very good team. You have Vasilevsky. Now you kind of bring in Bjorkstrand, you bring in Gourde. I like it. I like the move. I like that Tampa Bay is like, you know what? Yeah, Florida Panthers are good, but we can be good too. And for the Seattle Kraken, I think, Eyssimont, solid 3rd liner, depending how you kind of utilize him. But you get a 2nd-round pick in 2025, a conditional 1st round, and a conditional conditional first, both in 26 and 27. I like that. You get a bunch of draft capital with the Kraken, and you're able to try to target, okay, we're going to have a bunch of draft capital. We can either keep these picks, or we can trade these picks to move up in a draft. It gives you a little bit of flexibility there, in my opinion. Next trade there that went down is Florida Panthers acquire goalie Vitek Vanacek from the San Jose Sharks for forward Patrick Lies. So this happened on the 5th, right? Yeah, there's a lot of trades yesterday. Vanacek, he's been an NHL level goaltender. He can be solid. Again, with the Florida Panthers, just like that previous deal they made, I think they're just kind of throwing mud at the wall, hoping it sticks. It's just throwing shit at the wall, hoping it sticks. They don't need a crazy backup goaltender. They have Sergei Bobrovsky, but it makes sense. Kind of keep bringing in goaltenders and see who would work out. Now, I've already made videos about the Trent Frederick trade, and then the trade for Spencer Knight and other videos. You can check that out if you really want to. Those have been the moves around the league since the last few videos. This format for me is going to be easier for me to kind of get content out in a quicker way. But let's talk about it. Bruins fans, I'm talking to you here. Should they blow up the whole thing and trade everybody in a fire sale if you're a Bruins fan? To me, I think it's time. I think it's time to not trade every single piece, but I'm saying trade some of them, right? I'm looking at you, Charlie Coyle, and you got your no trade clause, and I understand that. But I think it's time to boogie on down and move them for some draft capital. I think the same thing about pretty much everybody else on this roster. The only guys that I feel personally that are untouchable, right, on this team is David Pastrnak, right? Because let's just call it what it is, Bruins fans. And this is what I'll go on a rant right here. I've had Bruins fans trade Pastrnak. You can get a ton of people. You can get a ton of draft picks, and Pasternak's not there. Pasternak's the only reason this team scores goals most nights, right? Can we stop the whole Pasternak's good defensively? Yeah, he's not the greatest defensively, and some of the turnovers he makes does make me want to chomp on a cyanide pill. I understand that, Bees fans, but without David Pastrnak, this team is probably maybe a 15-win team. There's been some nights where he is single-handedly carry this team the distance. So I don't want to hear any bitching. I don't. He's one of the better players. He's a superstar. He's one of the best players in the NHL. Is he Connor McDavid? No, but there's not that many Connor McDavids or Nathan McKinnons. He's a tier below that. But untouchables on this team, Pastrnak. Elias Lindholm, because you just signed to a contract. You're not going to sign and trade a guy, regardless of what people want to do with Zadorov. And I wasn't big on the Zadorov training. Brad Marchand, due to the injury, he's not going to be moved. But I would have moved Marchand if there was a proper deal and Marchand wanted to go. Charlie Coyle, I think you should think about it. Pavel Zacha, if the right move comes along, fine. But untouchables, Morgan Geekie, Matthew Patra, obviously Charlie McAvoy when healthy. We'll see how Hampus is. And Brandon Carlo would be an untouchable for me. I think pretty much everyone else, besides, again, Pasternak, Lindholm, and Patra just because he's young up front, and then McAvoy, and I believe Carlo should be an untouchable, even though some Bruins fans hate him for whatever reason. And then Swayman just because of the fucking contract. No one's going to take him unless you retain anything. I think everybody should be available. I think Morgan Geekie has shown you that he can be a 20-plus goal scorer. I mean, he started out the season slow. I mean, there's still a chance that if Geekie does get red hot and he has the ability to do so, he could have a 25-plus, maybe a 30-goal season. I know there's not a ton of games left. That would be a ridiculous pace you have to score on, but I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility when you're playing with David Pastrnak. I think everybody should be on the table. I think the Bruins need to keep acquiring second and first-round picks because they need to kind of retool the prospect pool, add more depth, and allow themselves more lottery tickets. Because every time you take that pick, it's a lottery ticket. It's not a sure thing. You don't know how that player is going to develop. Could be really good, could be really bad. Might as well give yourself as many lottery tickets as possible to try to hit. Because the draft, statistically, 25% of first rounders will see 100 games in the NHL level over the span of the NHL. So, the success rate isn't huge. So you give yourself, more chances at success. And I will say this, Bruins fans. I will say this. For the love of fucking God, stop bringing up the 2015 NHL draft. That was 10 years ago at this point. Let it fucking die. Jake DeBrusk turned into be a solid NHL player. Solid second, top six wing. Zaboral at one point, I was like, okay, turn things around. But he still turned into an NHL defenseman. Not what you wanted to be, but it is. And Stenshinen, I think he's overseas somewhere. He didn't pan out. I get it. It didn't go. You could have had Barzal. You could have had all these pieces. I get it. But it's 10 years ago. Let it go. Let it go. Sweeney has made some good draft picks regardless of what you think. There's been some good draft picks by Don Sweeney. Am I saying he's perfect? No. Am I saying he's my favorite GM in the league? I'm not even saying that. I just don't think it's as abysmal as people want to pretend it to be. Sure, missed on some pieces, but look at some of the drafts that we've had, some of the talent that we've had. I mean, if Matthew Patra can develop, that's another hit. They've kind of been missing, I will agree on this, hitting on that top-end talent in the draft. I would totally agree with that. But there's been certain drafts, like last year when they took Dean Letourneau, who really hasn't done much for Boston College, but he's a freshman, and they're the best team in the nation right now in the NCAA in Hockey East. See how it goes. He's a big body, 6'7". There's potential there. So I'm never really mad at a guy like Sweeney, especially late in a first round, picking a guy based on potential that could be a star-level player if he figures out how to play with that physical frame, that big physical frame at the NHL level, right? Just calling it how I see it, all right? I think as a general manager, it's understanding and realizing that your team is at a certain spot and kind of swallowing your pride. Because everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to secure their job for the future. But the one thing I will say I respect about some of these general managers, and I respect about Don Sweeney, is understanding, you're not in a Stanley Cup window right now. You're not even really in a playoff threat window right now. Accept the cards that you were dealt, make some moves, and try to acquire some future assets, right? So I'll kind of wrap the video here. This is a longer form video. This might get 0 views, might get 10. I don't really care. But if you do care and you do enjoy the content that I'm bringing forth, I really would appreciate if you hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. It does help the channel out greatly. Saying how it is, it's what every YouTuber does. I'm begging for some likes and comments and subscriptions because it helps the channel grow. I love talking hockey with y'all. I'm still, just kind of an update, I probably am going to still release that 40-50 minute documentary. I'm still editing it probably in the next, probably 2 months because it's not really time sensitive in that regard. It's kind of a historical video. But I'm just going to say fuck it. If YouTube doesn't want to let me monetize it, I'll just put it up and hopefully things kind of kick off in the right direction. But let me know your thoughts down below in the comment section. What did you think about Canadians booing the national anthem for the Americans? What did you think about the trades that happened around the league? And Bruins fans, what do you think about Don Sweeney's moves? And do you believe that they should be selling off as many assets as they can to acquire future draft capital? Let me know your thoughts. I am Captain Paul. See you on the next one.